back to Construction Conversations. We now have intro music. I think I mentioned to you to this, Jackie. Thanks to your suggestion.
Thank you.
So, well done.
Appreciate it.
So, Jackie Guilbault is our next is our guest today, and we worked together at Versatile back in the day. Construction tech marketing, deep insights, I would say, into kind of field adoption, product storytelling, and industry trust. We'll kind of dig into what that means. You've worked across a wide range of personas in construction, from operators to PMs, learning what it takes to build tech that resonates. And we're excited to chat with you, Jackie. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Stephen and Lars. It's good to see you both again.
So, in the prep conversation, we were talking about Costco. When was the last time you shopped at Costco?
Within the last year, I would say. Yeah,
Okay.
you can't go in under $500, so you really have to be strategic when you make that commitment.
Yeah, it's a whole rabbit hole. As we discussed, we could do a whole podcast on just Costco, but we
Well,
won't.
the real question though is how much do you waste by over purchasing at
Yeah,
Costco?
that's the thing. Well, you know what? There's when you buy at Costco, then you actually need to buy a bigger like dumpster and like a trash can because when you're
The
buying
boxes itself
pallets of tallow, you can't get the pallets in your usual trash can.
will share
Uh,
your warm-up words. What was it?
or earthworm castings. That was the latest purchase. Yeah, that I mean, I'm excited about them. I'm leaning into some gardening right now, and I've got a few garden beds that the soil isn't strong. So
Is the
I think the
season.
Strong
castings are going to do it
soil.
for me.
Yeah.
Strong
Well,
soil.
this has been a non-traditional start, Jackie, but appreciate you kind of working through this with us. So, one of the reasons we wanted to have you on and have this conversation was Lars and I have both been on the field ops side. We've both now been kind of interacting in the tech layer of the industry, and there's a lot of storytelling that happens, and it needs to happen, but a lot of it isn't effective. And so one of the reasons, and one of the things I appreciated about where you were coming from, even at our time with Versatile, is you seem to kind of understand the industry at a layer that we really appreciate. And so I guess just to jump in this, like you've worked across multiple different construction tech companies. What drew you to construction originally?
Yeah, totally unconventional. I worked originally in tech. I started my career life at Microsoft, actually at an internship while I was at University of Nevada, Reno, and went back to the Bay Area. I was really excited to apply to tech companies, and my foray into construction was really actually accidental. I landed at Topcon Positioning Systems and was really attracted to the cutting edge technology they were doing at the time. They were doing reality capture with mobile mapping and drones and precision GPS. And I just thought it was so interesting. And there was a lot of opportunity in the marketing department to make a big impact. So the job itself was really attractive. But then as I got deeper into it, I would say what kept me there and what kept pursuing new roles in construction was really about the people. It's a very hardworking industry. There's a strong sense of humor, no BS, authenticity, which I love. And what you see is what you get. People bring their full selves to the job, and the bond among teams too is really tight knit. And so that culture is what really kept me into this field, and wanted to learn as much as I can and keep contributing.
Hmm. So what was your first impression of maybe starting to interact with field level personas? What was your first impression and maybe challenge as you kind of walked into a very new environment with a lot of new dynamics that maybe you hadn't really interacted with before?
Yeah, I think that understanding that lived experience is really important. And so you have to take the time to be in the field and be humble, ask questions. No, don't assume that you know because you've read it online or watched a couple YouTube videos. It's not that easy to understand what it's like to be in the field without actually being there and having that experience, because timelines are extremely fast. You don't see that online. You have to be there. You have to see how important safety protocols are. There's so many aspects to it that you wouldn't even know to Google. You can't do it that way. And so being on site and interacting with field professionals was an eye opener, because you just have to take it all in and be okay with not knowing. And I worked across a variety of personas: UAV, PM, PX, and now attorneys, and they're not the same. Even if the title is the same from other industries, you really have to just start from scratch, approach it as a student, and be willing to learn and take in as much as possible. And I think just being respectful of people's time too. It's very, very tight schedules. I think, Lars, you've said this before. It's like asking people to stop, fix a plane while it's in flight. And you have to be really conscious of that when you're asking for advice. And so,
Yeah.
just taking that time, I think, is really important, and having that um, self-awareness of what you're asking people to do.
How many of your peers right now that you interact with have that sort of boots on ground experience that you were fortunate enough to get, say, early on in your career?
I would say it's becoming more common. I think people really understand that you can't go into a construction tech role and make assumptions anymore. I think there's been enough stories. This industry is very much based on relationships, and people talk about their experiences. And so if you have experience with a technology that clearly just doesn't know what they're talking about, it's going to get around. And so, right now I see it all the time. People really do make the effort to go. I'm a big proponent of customer advisory boards, so you get that exposure in that pipeline to get that feedback, and you can get on the site. But also in companies, I've seen them really trying to recruit. You guys are going to hate this, but from the field. So,
No.
previous PMs and,
Why wouldn't tech companies be
Yeah.
recruiting from the field, right? The
Yeah.
guys that have
yeah,
pulled
I
the
mean, there's
levers,
some.
twisted the knobs, right?
Yeah, you don't want to take people out from an industry that is notorious for trying to hold on to talent. I think
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
that's a challenge, but I think that there's nothing that replaces that experience, and so tech companies are really acknowledging that. I work with a couple PMPXs, former PMPXs now, and
Mm.
that is invaluable. Their perspective.
Not to digress too much, Stephen, from some of the topics
Digress away.
we cover, but here I go. We've lost that sort of master builder program, I think, as an industry. College doesn't somehow, you don't graduate college having been partnered up with a person, say, for 5 to 10 years, and watching them, strip forms, lay things out, pull wire, do plans. I mean, some of my favorite books when I was growing up was on architecture, and I think it was David McCullough, and there was one about like building a cathedral, right? And those master builders, and it was
Mm.
it was a lifetime journey of building. I, again, we've come so far from that, but you know, you know, how how can we acknowledge, like, you got to get dirty, you got to get your hands dirty, you got to get in the field, and then maybe then you can go try different things, but to not experience that stress, that chaos that can exist, the plane, you're retooling it while you're flying it.
Yeah.
I just think, there's there's this race rather than a long game approach to some of this, and you can't be an expert overnight, right? You have to experience, you got to get curious, got to ask questions. And I think I'd really like to see some of that, whether it's apprenticeship, journeyman, for, we'll call it like managers, or
Yeah.
office leadership, like how to build that. It's hard, especially when you're running so fast, and you're growing as a company, or or someone sold you a bag of goods, and you're like, well, this is what I have to do because this is what this person told me, right?
Mm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I also think there's a lot of value to the cross training that happens as people are going between different roles in the industry, right? Whether it's field to tech, design to field. I think the more we have that kind of role switching happening,
Yeah.
not only do they have a better perspective on all the different dynamics that are at play, but also I think empathy comes from understanding, right? And so for me, like, I've been in the field, and you mentioned, Jackie, like picking up at this element of time is really valuable. And so when I'm on a call with a project team, man, I try to really prioritize being succinct and, economy of words. Like how do you drive value in a really succinct way so that they understand you kind of get it, right? And I think to your previous point about the increased in domain expertise, I think the days of the founders coming in and saying like, their uncle renovated a cabin, and so like I have a good understanding of commercial construction, and I think those days are over, right? And I think
Yeah.
we can kind of celebrate that a little bit.
Yeah.
So that's but maybe, going back to the original question, Lars, you coming into the industry with Herman Construction from your military background, what were your first kind of insights or perspective on just industry dynamics?
That's a great question. What my first industry, sort of like I'll call it like smack to the face, is I was not prepared. I did not know how to build things. Right? Just because I was sort of in construction in the military, it's like, yeah, I'm not a builder, right? So one of the first things I did was try to surround myself with great builders, right?
Mm.
Guys who were much older than me, who'd been there and done it, and that I could learn from, right? That was important to me. And just being curious. Man, I read so much trying to learn. Again, everyone's got a founder story, and I'm not saying mine's right or wrong. It is what it, I guess you could say, was. But I there was many hours every day for many years dedicated to learning and reading. I'm going to say that I wasn't the most efficient, but I did it out of survival.
Mm.
And it was this, I got to outwork my competition, right? They already know what I don't know. So how do I learn? Right. And so from a founding story, that was my story.
Mm.
After that proficiency is gained, it became fairly programmatic and routine. So I felt fairly comfortable, but whether now it's, we'll call it a tech startup or even going into doing development now, it's like, this is insane. How many levers are here? I got to know which ones to pull and how much research. I mean, it's, I think you have, and we talked a little bit this about on the last podcast, you have to have a certain innate curiosity
Yeah.
for that humbling of, can you tell me more about the pain you experience on a job? What does this look like empathy, right? Like,
Yeah.
I want to help, I want to jump in, I want to learn. And being uncomfortable, like being uncomfortable, like it's like, oh, do I really
Yeah.
want to go, the plane's shaking, right? The plane, and I'm losing altitude. So, I so appreciate the question, Stephen. But I think from a value standpoint for listeners, I think it's okay. It's important to surround yourself with people, mentors, coaches that can help you through those periods to to start gaining altitude, start get back up on that glide slope. So anyway, just share that because I certainly surrounded myself with those people who help, and I wouldn't be in the position I am without their help.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that is the kind of common thread, intellectual curiosity. And to your point, like I had a mentor early that would tell me, like, go and lean in where you're uncomfortable,
Mm.
because that's where there's value, not just for the project, but for yourself in terms of what you're going to learn. And that's where there's maybe non-average value. But Jackie, going back to a few things you said, which I really liked, was even this mention of personas, which I don't think is always recognized from folks coming into the industry, which is really a miss. And the fact that you picked up on it early, I think, separates your learning curve a little bit, which is it's not just construction workers, right? And so as you're coming into the industry, understanding that a superintendent has a whole different dynamic than a project manager, than a PX, than estimator. What do you think gave you that broad awareness? Like how did you kind of come in with that awareness into the fold?
Yeah, I don't know if it was broad initially because each role, I think I realized early on that construction can't be lumped together. So there's vertical, there's horizontal, there's,
Right.
so many different areas of it. And I think that initially I was working on, for instance, precision machine control. And so that's horizontal construction. That's an entirely different, operator and persona. And you just can't lump it in together, even when you're doing messaging, because those vague ROI statements or accuracy claims, they don't land unless it's very specific to who you're talking to. So I think that understanding the role, their pain points, why they're evaluating this technology, how they did it before, and then just really listening and being perceptive to the environment, getting on site. I actually ended up operating an excavator because I really want to understand. I was so unprepared. I had great
How
teachers.
long did you last? How long did you last?
Honestly, under 5 minutes. It was faster than I thought. This thing cruised, and just understanding, okay, I get it now. I get why it's scary to update to a certain technology if you already feel comfortable with your grading accuracy. It's not like that. So I think that just really getting your hands on it, like you said, getting your hands dirty, actually using the software, the hardware, and the technology really helps understand the personas, talking to people, Google and research, and now ChatGPT, which I didn't have starting out, is great, but it just doesn't replace those conversations. So I think you really just have to understand those pain points, and word of mouth is so important. So you're going to hear things that you wouldn't online as well. People are going to be really honest. So for instance, when I transitioned to working with surveyors, I joined their local surveyor group, and you just hear so much the reality of things, right? Like why it's going to be a challenge to go from total stations to drones. You don't really hear that when things first launch. So it just really comes down, I think, in product marketing and effective marketing messaging to understand who you're talking to, have the right message, and have specificity. Because if it's generalized, it's just not going to be credibility killing. It's just going to be annoying too. So there's a lot of negatives if you don't understand exactly who you're talking to and their workflows.
I love what you said about surveyors and it'll be so easy. We'll use drones to do that now.
Exactly.
Right? It's going to be amazing. And of course, you get everyone in the boardroom, or pick a VC company, and then all of a sudden they're like, "Amazing! Here's a check, go." And I was shared a book. It's called The Mom Test. And for a lot of founders out there, I think this is like a must read. But it basically sort of like correlate. Well, who are you sharing this product with, right? Are you telling your maybe your best friend or your mom? And well, is your mom going to be like, that's a great idea, yeah, good job, or is your mom going to be like, that's the worst idea ever, and let me tell you why? No, she's going to be like, she's supportive. I think that's wonderful. You should go do that, right? Rather than like, how do I get to the people that won't lie to me and will prevent me from wasting a lot of time and money, right? And if I want to maximize my impact on this earth while I'm here for a really short period of time, it's like, I need to get to that reality check as soon as possible. Great book, highly recommend it.
Yeah, there's a lot of good resources out there. I happen to really like Construction Management Jumpstart.
Why do you like it?
What'd you say?
Why do you like it?
I like it because, I'm always learning about this industry. And I think that even though I know the personas, the phases of construction are still something I'm learning, right, and getting into. And so this is really helpful for understanding the details. I work with different construction documents now, and understanding when and how they're used and where the risk is in them is really effective. So shout out to my coworker, Kyle Dinka, for recommending that. But I'll tell you, actually, sorry, Lars, were you going to say something?
No, it's a testament to your curiosity that still, for all your years in the industry, you have a construction management, dare I say, jumpstart or for idiots. Like I just want to look at it again. And but there's so many, again, it's fascinating. There's so many buzzwords around like new project delivery methods or this new best practice on scheduling, or what about this for estimating? It's like, oh my gosh, at the end of the day, we're building the building. There's material costs, there's labor costs. And what's in the middle of all that? A ton of people, right? Really, it's how do we manage people, right? How do we align behind a goal? Anyway, I just think it's fascinating given your experience. You're still like curious and reading it. I love it.
Love it. I love studying. I love this podcast. I love the Content Crew with Jeff Sample.
Yep.
You follow there's a lot of people on LinkedIn that are great. Tanis from Zachary Group, they're just great on LinkedIn. So I think there's a lot of resources and people that love to share their experience. And there's always something to learn, or, people are launching products every day that you're not quite sure if they're really going to help construction. And so it's really helpful to hear their
Yeah,
insight.
and like you mentioned, the industry has so many different layers and fragments to it, right?
Yeah.
And so what folks are talking about maybe very applicable to vertical, maybe more applicable to the horizontal world. I've
Yeah.
been on a sales side of some horizontal conversations recently, and just realizing how little I know about infrastructure work, right? It's just a very different environment and a lot of different dynamics.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
but I want to hear your story that you were going to tell us.
I was going to tell a story.
You said you were going to tell a story, and
Okay, I
then
can tell a story.
Lars interjected.
Oh,
I
I
did.
think I think I was going to say that, understanding personas is interesting when you're launching a new product and you think, so you do the initial work. You say, okay, we have this, GPS that can process data on site in construction. Isn't that great? People are going to say, yeah, why wouldn't they? But then the reality is they're going to fly before the job starts that day or at the end of the day. And they can just go back to the trailer and process the data there with connectivity outside of the distractions of the job site. And so I had a product that I was launching in that sense. So you have to really take the time to understand those users and talk to them. And I've just seen it where you think you do the research, but then the reality of it is this product, we had to completely pivot, and it was much better for mining. It was better when
Mm,
you are, really truly out of connectivity, and there is a safety use case where you need to see everything right away. And when you need to get that construction data to a BDC manager, it's just a different workflow. And so
yeah.
just taking a step back and really seeing it going in person, or the bane of my existence early on, or when I really started to understand, okay, I get it. I get construction was when I started seeing how unhinged stock photos are. I know you've seen them. Where, why is that person holding a hammer? Or the safety risks that are in there where the rebar doesn't have caps on them. You see that you can't replace that. You have to talk to people and be on site and be perceptive and kind of understand, or else you're going to lose credibility with that marketing really quick when you have, someone in a construction vest that's actually from Europe and not
Yeah.
America. So,
So
understanding those nuances, I think, is really important.
I think that doesn't get enough attention of just for a lot of startups, there's a lot of stock photos that are used that really should never see the light of day. It's actually funny. I was actually talking with one of like Hugh Seaton, and he was launching a new aspect of his website, and hopefully if he's listening, this isn't embarrassing, but there was a photo selected that I of a person, referencing or using the product. And he just looked like an absolute goober and someone who you would never actually interact with on a site. And I was like, Hugh, we can't use that
You
photo.
can't use
And
this.
but
I
we
know, I
got
used
published.
to.
We used it for like 6 months. And I was in Puerto Rico like I don't know 3 months ago. And we pulled in from the airport heading to the site. We're going to build the house. And there's a big billboard with that same dude representing like a telecom service, which I really enjoyed.
Amazing. But it doesn't
But
kill
yeah,
credibility sometimes? When you
yeah,
see that, you
100%.
just, think, oh, this person doesn't really get it. And they seem small, but you have to be on site to see that. You have
Yeah.
to do it, you know.
But tell me more because I really like what you say, which is the opportunity to go deeper with the field team and really learn their workflows, learn the language and the nuances of their environment.
Yeah.
That isn't often given. You have to earn some credibility to get to that point, right? And so can you maybe speak to me of like how do you feel you earned that credibility as you're coming into the new industry? And how did you get to that next step? Like, was there value offered to even get the opportunity to go deeper with them?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think early on, I was creating messaging for a distributor group, and well, they were the sales reps for distributors, and I was pushing a lot of content out, and I felt like I wasn't a trusted advisor. They weren't
Mm.
asking me for anything. They're like, thanks. Maybe they wouldn't even respond. And I wanted to be that person that they're like, hey, I need this competitive intelligence for this product. I wanted that two-way relationship. So I asked my boss, I said, I don't feel like I'm a partner. I don't feel respected. Is it because I'm a woman? And he was like, what? No, it's because you've never done sales. And so I realized my perspective really needs to relax. I need to shift that into, you have to have some grounding and some self-awareness on where that resistance could be. And I didn't go to those people directly. I went to the distributor trainings. Like I said, I operated an excavator. I went to the local groups. There's great groups like Construction Society Solutions where you can interact with people in a very just relaxed way. And I think that earning that curiosity, that foundation is really important. And then you can start to set up those meetings because sometimes you don't know what to ask too. So over time, you start to build momentum, build a network. And specifically for the field, I would say that a big moment when I started to understand the messaging was actually this guy. He's highly respected in construction. He's the PM. I think it's actually Stephen Poppy. He told me that I had really good content, and that meant a lot to me. When you start to see that, okay, you earn that over time, and you have to deliver good content and good results, and check. Don't be afraid to check with people if it's the right messaging, if they've lived it. That it's a different language, and so I think it takes time. I hope that I answered the question, but it is a process, and like everything, I would say not like everything. Construction is unique in the sense that it's very relationship
Mm.
driven, and it does take time to earn it. But using the products, using the technology probably made a difference because I have the foundation to say, okay, this is where I've started, and how do I build on that? So even flying drones, just trying it and understanding how to process that data, and then coming to who does it for a living, saying, okay, how do you visualize this for your clients, and what is the pain point? I think really helps.
I mean, I think what you're pointing at, which I really like, besides you saying nice things about me, is that like intellectual curiosity is kind of the currency of the industry, and people pick up on that,
Yeah.
and that is kind of there's a value exchange of just that, and I've seen that in my career. But I also heard this idea of, you attempting to offer value through the relationship outside of just buy my product, use my product,
Totally.
right? And I think that's really important, right? Because like you said, if ultimately it's about relationship is about this kind of give and take, right? And so yeah, I think that's very interesting. I think, Lars, when you look at your kind of career with Herman, was any of this like attempted to be baked into how you guys onboard this idea of trying to hire people who are intellectually curious, or was that more of like a byproduct of the culture that you guys had set up?
This is a great question. In the beginning, it was a byproduct. Then I went deep on hiring science and personalities and what makes a construction or a successful construction manager, what makes a successful superintendent, right? And not just a superintendent, but for the type of projects we do or the type of customer we work with, right? And actually, as we sort of bring this up, I think I know who we should have on as a guest because I tried multiple different things that are out there. Tools, you Myers Briggs, DISC, all those things. But there's one in particular called Culture Index that blew my mind. It connected like four different disparate dots, and all of a sudden it was like that spark that like no wonder everyone, all my top performers are the exact same in this sort of, you know, uh, culture index world. I get it now. This is who I've been trying to hire, and the people that have where there's friction in the organization, they're over here. They I have them in the wrong role. They're not a bad person. They're in the wrong role,
Hmm.
right? And they have other skill sets that can bring to any organization. And so really from an ops standpoint, you got to think about it more like offense, defense. Are they skeptical, or are they like super trusting and everything's going to work out just fine, right? Are they highly analytical, highly detailed, or are they, oh no, 50,000 foot view, I can't get into what the specs say, right? It's like, no. If you're a project manager, like, you got to read the contract, you got to know the specs, man. So, little things like that, but also being aware as people progress in a career, proficiency at those things, but then there's times where you can graduate out of them, but you have to have built that foundation. So,
Mm.
um, yeah, I'd like to say, I had some magic sauce in the beginning. I think it was developed over time, and great people coaching me up along the way with some great tools. But I highly
Yeah.
encourage it doesn't matter what industry, there are amazing tools out there to help organizations find the right people for the position that they're hiring for.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, it seems like we're at a point in terms of a need for resources that you don't hear a ton about the nuances of hiring practices in our industry, but it's really important still, right?
Yeah, 100%. And what's crazy is once this insight's gained into an organization, one, succession planning becomes a lot easier, right?
Mm.
And you might have like we'll call it a young, who knows, 24-year-old who's just crushing it, and we'll call it an ops director who's struggling. And well, it's because the ops director really wasn't designed to do that role. But this 24-year-old, you should have a conversation with. They've got the right stuff. They look at the world the right way to see sort of what that, job description or role of responsibility in the organization requires. And again, a little bit of a tangent, but I think it really goes back to, you know, how companies can hire the right people and or bring in people from other skill sets into an organization or other industries, and then take that experience and then parlay it into other things into that organization. And I know many companies have grabbed people outside of construction, brought them in, and have been a game changer for that organization.
Yeah, that outside industry thing is really interesting in my world from the tech side. I want to say for the record that I hate when people assume that construction is behind. I think it's a really lazy narrative. And so I think the most successful messaging and people that come in are they don't think that way. They think construction's, been building for thousands of years without the tech, and so it just it really needs to be a problem that's being solved, and it can't just be based on that general like digitizing construction. I think that's really ineffective, and when people acknowledge that when they're coming into the industry, it's just going to make them so much more successful, I think.
That's well said.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and having that understanding, I think really maybe separates you from 99% of the rest of maybe marketing in the
Yeah,
industry.
yeah, right. I would actually, it is interesting. I mean, here's the deal. And we'll call it truth bomb. Construction isn't behind in terms of what we build, right? Look at what is built, right? Look at the challenges that are solved. Look at the things that are, I mean, it is truly amazing. How we arrive there are better ways on how we can get there. Maybe, and this is probably the thing that I'm passionate about, which is like how we get there. Are we the most efficient, and do we give the best tools to, we'll call it the engineers or the managers, the supers, the quality control managers, like, to be like hyper efficient and hyper aware of all of the things that have to be simultaneously managed. And if we're using, and these are my things, right? If we're using Outlook and Excel to do it, like, there's got to be a better way. Like, it's 2025, right? And I was not okay. So I was watching like a clip, and it was like a highlight on like how employees who are in the government are trying to like retire from the government, and it's a 3-inch stack of manual paper that needs signatures, 600 feet below ground in a vault with a person walking a cart around. And I'm like,
Yeah.
it's working, right?
But if
But
the
that's the
solution that's
opportunity.
like promoted to you is harder and more, it takes weeks of training, then you'll
Oh,
revert back to that hand
yeah.
signature. And I think that's really important in the construction industry specifically is if it doesn't do what it says online and it's
Oh,
actually harder, credibility killer. And everybody's
gone
going
Yeah.
to hear about it.
instantaneously.
Yeah.
And everyone that's listened to this has been in that position.
Exactly.
Total waste of time. And then you're less trusting moving forward. Like, I'm gonna hang up on you. You don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Click.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't do a great intro and providing maybe some of the context of the
Wait,
perspective you're bringing to the table.
35 minutes into it, now we're gonna do
Yeah.
the intro.
I'm really glad we circled back
But
to
This is
that.
how much this is how much Stephen avoids intros for the listeners.
that's
Okay.
right.
I'll
It's
edit this
becoming a
in.
situation.
Once I'm forced into it, I'll provide the intro. But I think most of the listeners will probably understand marketing, right? Hey, let's, tell stories about products to make people buy them. Not, I think many people understand like product, but when you combine both of those things in a title, product marketing, can you just kind of go back and maybe fill in the gaps for us a little bit on like what is that?
Yeah, because marketing in itself is so broad. I mean, I think
Yeah.
people may not appreciate that if you're from outside of it, because it can be anything from events to social media. So, product marketing is launching new products to market and really understanding where it's going to fit in and who it's for. And then also just educating users on how to use your product most effectively. So, I think the most effective marketing isn't salesy, it's education based. So it's
Mm,
how to solve a problem and really making sure that that job site pain is answered. And so that's why it's really important to know who you're talking to. And part of product marketing is defining those personas, defining the market where you fit in. How do you compare to, what else is on the market and what differentiates you? So it's really
mm.
understanding where you fit um, into that ecosystem when you launch a product.
Let me ask you a question in terms of, where you see content going. And you brought up this example earlier around, you thought this one, we'll call it drone surveying solution was really slick, or this
Yeah,
team did, right? Like, hey,
yeah,
hey, we've done it. We've solved the problem. And it's like, again, mom test. Wait a minute. No, not really.
yeah,
But over in the mining industry, this is fantastic, right?
yeah,
And so when I heard that, I immediately went to a very niche solution,
yeah,
right? Like, this is we're gonna niche this down into, we're gonna solve this very specific industry sort of, we'll call problem. I think about like project management solutions. Yeah, there's enough out there right now. Construction accounting solutions. Yep, there's enough out there right now. Where do you see construction tech remaining broad, high level, 50,000 foot, or do you see these niche solutions starting to pop up based on persona? And when I say persona, think more or less like that, what I'd say is the three-dimensional problem in construction, whereby it's not just like your job title, but wait a minute, how big of a company you are and
mhm,
what type of projects, or, you know, vertical, building, residential, commercial, all those things. Like, do you see us going into this more niche, or do you see it staying high level? Any opinions or thoughts on that?
yeah. I don't know that they're necessarily binary. I think that it's more about solving issues through a stream through the construction life cycle and all the people
Hmm.
that touch that. So I think it'll be problem based and it will touch the personas that work on that problem. So, for instance, at the company I work for now at Document Crunch, we identify risk in construction documents, but that doesn't stop in the initial prime contract or the negotiation. It goes all the way through when you're executing the job because people in the field, you can negotiate the best contract in the world, but if you don't follow the terms that you negotiated initially or use it to your advantage, you don't always have to reach into your contingency budget for things. You can use the contract to your advantage. And so I think it's gonna be more of that of solving problems along a stream of a specific I guess workflow or problem throughout. I think that's where I'm seeing it going. So not necessarily isolated or too broad because it still has to solve a problem.
Right.
Yeah,
But
and
yeah,
I think the other side of that is I think in maybe like looking back, like point solutions have been maybe as we've gone more niche. But I think as the perspective on the problem becomes higher definition, I think it'll evolve to Jackie's point of that niche solution being able to interact with adjacent technologies and adjacent workflows so that it's not just one thing and then you have to exit that environment and go to another platform. But I don't know. That's an interesting question, Lars. What's your thought?
Not every company's the same. Um, and I think there's a lot of labels that, oh, again, it goes back to, oh, it's in construction, right? Every company's the same. And I do, not every company is dealing with the same problems. Um, and so I think we're at this point where, everyone desires this one solution that's gonna make it all work, right? I don't think that's truly ever attainable, because if you make that one solution, there's just gonna be gaps. There's gonna be holes in this solution. And so that's where I believe that niche down, how to solve these individual, pieces of the puzzle that is construction. Now, is the pain great enough to put a product in there, right? There might be pain, but is it large enough, right? To sway, companies to either adopt something or change something. But I do, there are solutions that when I was running, my company, that like I was looking for that didn't exist, that I know other companies, were dealing with. Some have popped up, some haven't. So I do think that there are going to be more specific solutions, because I just don't think it's just this broad brushstroke that there's just that, a couple things can solve it. So, I mean, that's my opinion. And again, Jackie's seen a lot, Stephen, you've seen a lot, but yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, the key
And
is
it'll be interesting how, AI is layered on top of things
yeah.
to then maybe solve some of those little things, right?
Yeah, it'll be key to see how it plugs into other workflows, because the last thing
Right.
people want is another password,
Yeah,
you
that's the
know?
truth.
But
But I want
plug for password managers. Like, there is a whole
to, yeah,
category of software out there that if you are listening to this, I think, oh gosh, I know the one I like is LastPass. It has changed my life. I highly recommend. Do it for your family. Go to 20 character long passwords. I've had my identity stolen. Like, do this. Do this for yourself. It's worth it.
yeah. Put all your most valuable information in a single cloud environment
Here we go. Here
that
we go,
that creates
Steven.
a nice honeypot for just kidding. I use one too. But all of our data is eventually stolen. But
Yeah.
back to storytelling, I think Jackie, one of the things that you and I have vibed out about at times is like we've talked about even previously, poor storytelling in the industry, right? And so maybe, when you're talking about product marketing, you mentioned the role of education kind of
Mhm.
in the delivery of information about a product. Um, Maybe in your role at Document Crunch, how do you bring all of that together into effective storytelling? Like, what does that look like in your role now?
Yeah, I think that people absorb information in different ways. So it's important to have a multi-channel approach too. So we'll do things in podcasts, videos, some specific to customers, office hours, to written content. So I think it's important to have a variety of tools that people can look at. But I think that looking at what is going on in the industry and matching that with our product and make it really timely and relevant is important. So for instance, just recently we launched a specific checklist that you can review your contracts against the tariff
Mm.
most common issues. And so just making things that are very relevant and useful. This was a free promotion that we did to the industry. So not always, doing things for the commercial value too is really important. Just going for the educational part, and if they see value in the tool down the line, they could see the potential and then they'll come back to us, right? So I think that just looking at things from a broader view and making sure that it's angled for something that's specific, that's valuable, and in a way that's really easy to consume is kind of the key in
Yeah.
educating the market and bringing people in, because um, that's what's going to help people make the product decision overall. People don't really want to be sold to. They just want to be educated. How can this make my life easier, reduce risk, increase safety? They're pretty basic needs in construction. And if you can solve one of those needs and just educate on how to make it easy, that's the key.
I think speaking from personal experience, both as a GC and now software too, if this thing isn't saving me time in a big way,
Yeah,
like I don't have time for it, right? Like
exactly.
no, in my organization, I'm not going to adjust my organization. Interesting, but it has to save me time, and it has to return time to the organization, so much so that then those individuals are now revenue producing rather than overhead sucking,
Yes.
right? Like, and that, and it is fascinating hearing, we'll call it some of the old school people. Well, that's just so and so's job. No, you recognize that this will fundamentally change and return a lot of time to your organization. Yeah, but I don't want to deal with it right now. That's where I think leadership, that next generation of leadership is coming in and saying, like, yeah, we don't want to do it that way. That's insane, right? Like, there's
Yeah.
got to be a better way. We can speed this whole thing up. And I
Exactly.
think that to me is, if I'm looking for tech solutions in construction, it's how is this returning time to my organization so I can put those individuals on the tip of the spear and make the organization money, make it more profitable.
Yeah, and what's going to make that effective when you're communicating that into the market isn't stats. It's going to be real customer stories that the
Yeah,
industry respects or relates to. They don't have to be
love
the
it.
biggest companies, but it's people who've actually done it and experienced it. And I think what makes Document Crunch unique too is their CEO came from the industry. He was a construction attorney. And so he intimately knows the pain that our
Yeah.
personas deal with. And that makes a world of difference because the product
Yeah.
is built for someone like him. So he's going to know how it needs to be structured and what's going to make that time actually give you that return. It's not just an
100%.
idea for someone that we're not familiar with. So I think that in itself makes a huge difference.
So maybe another point on storytelling, because I think there's something here where they're only as effective as they're heard, right? And marketing in the industry is classically hard
Yeah.
for anyone that's tried to sell into the market, right? Because who
Click.
reads, right? Like construction dive, like what portion of the industry is actually on LinkedIn? Probably a very small percentage. And so like, have you figured out like what are the forums that you are marketing into that you see the best maybe return?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Great
I
question.
think that the key isn't a single form. It is a broad, you do have to have multi-channels in construction, and it is going to be still an in-person industry. So I do think that joining your local associations, joining the local groups, AGC is a great organization. Going to the trade shows where people's job is to evaluate new technology is going to be important. But once they leave that, they it you know how it is. You go somewhere and you're going to forget, right? So you do have to have those mediums to reach people consistently. So although email is not going to be how people are going to make a decision, it's a great reminder. So the statistic I think in normal marketing is 5 to 7 touches until someone comes in for a demo. But I think that in construction it might be more, or you're just making richer content. So we'll do a lot of how-to guides that give people, where they're motivated to put their email in, and it has to be very specific, very valuable. So, for instance, prompting an AI for a specific persona. So, if you want to know X, this is how you do it. Just making it actually valuable that you can take that marketing content and go make your life easier after it, I think is our goal. So,
Hmm.
definitely in person, digital is still important. I do think a lot of construction is online. I think it's increasing because people it's a community based industry, and so
Like
there
on
are a lot of
LinkedIn,
LinkedIn
you
groups.
think?
Yeah, I do. I don't think that LinkedIn email works. Sending messages.
Yeah,
You know
no.
how it is. You delete them before you respond.
I mean, there's probably not a more ineffective feature in a tech stack than LinkedIn messages.
It doesn't, it's not
Does
good for
any,
sale.
I
But it is good
mean,
for relationship building. You know, if you're just sending a genuine, this industry, I will say, is very generous and you know, supportive. If you wanted to reach out
yeah,
one on one and say, "Hey, I am a founder and I have this idea, and you're obviously an expert at your job, and I think it could help you," I think it would be effective to get a response. But if you're sending a mass email to a bunch of people that says that, you know, ad notification, no, it's not going to work. But
yeah, that's
I
fair.
think it's important to have multi-channel. I do like ENR. I do like Construction Dive. I think they're effective. The webinars get a broad reach. I think people
Mm,
want to learn.
yeah,
You know, I think people are still, um,
They're curious. Goes
yeah,
back to being curious.
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
And I think it speaks to like the point you just made. Education as a part of your marketing strategy is key because it's generally a curious industry. That's huge. I know we're running out of time, but I do want to ask, I think one of the threads that we've kind of pulled on is this idea of you approaching the industry with humility and how that's led you to these different opportunities.
yeah,
Um, what advice would you give to a woman coming into the industry generally? Maybe they're on the tech side, field side. Obviously, there's going to be some dynamics, but any broad advice to women or just someone new coming into the industry?
yeah. I don't know that I haven't personally seen gender play a role in my career. I think that I've been met with a lot of generosity. Um, People have assumed that I didn't come from the industry, but they were right. So it's been really helpful and people have been welcoming. And so that said, I would say that anybody coming into the industry or shifting from doing a, you know, traditional tech marketing role to construction specifically, I would just say lead with a lot of humility and curiosity
Mm,
rather than pretense, even though it may work in traditional tech. It may not work in construction. Like you said, it's an entirely different way to reach people. People are busy. They want to go home after work. They don't want to go to a cocktail hour usually. So it's tough. And you have to find ways that really work for people's schedules, for their motivations, for their interests, and make it really valuable. So leading with that curiosity is going to be really going to make all the difference.
love that. I think instead of a cocktail hour, if you showed up with a bucket of beers at the end of a day on a job site, you could probably get a collective audience that would listen.
I like that.
But maybe
Outside the gate.
not the most
Yeah.
safe practice. Um, what here's one last question that I like to ask them. I'll let you, Lars. But so you know, I've had mentors. I kind of love the idea of trying to set up lessons learned for the next generation. What would you say to your younger self, knowing what you know now about how your career has evolved and all the different twists and turns?
Yeah.
How would you talk to your younger self?
I think that I worked well with what I had, you know, the knowledge about the time, but I think I would have gotten on the job faster. It took
Mm,
a while I took classes. You know, we had a test field site, but I would have been in the field faster and I would have encouraged my younger self to negotiate even just working there or doing a 2 week internship. I think there's no replacement. And that experience would have saved me a lot of, you know, probably missed stock images and um, you know, not using the right terminology for things or using iPads. Gonna go on a tangent. We would launch these apps when iPads first came out, and that was so ridiculous. So it's a glass screen in a very rugged environment, and it was launching global. So the people in Finland were like, "This isn't even going to survive in our conditions," and so it's really important to just understand that and getting that on-site experience early, I think would have helped me just be
yeah,
miles ahead early on. So I think that for anybody considering it, just try to finagle a way to, you know, add value and
field
do an
first.
internship.
Field
Field
first.
That is
first.
a common theme of a few different guests we've had on is yeah, get as deep into the field as you can as early as possible. That's really good,
Absolutely.
Jackie. Thank
There's
you.
no replacement.
Lars,
Yeah, Jackie, you're awesome. This has been
Thank
fantastic.
you.
No, I love the background. Love your approach on things. Stephen, what do you? I mean, have you seen any specific AI ones? you know?
I mean, not for construction. I took I think I told you this, the master class on
Yes, you did.
AI, and I found that very useful.
Was that on
Um,
Level Set or which platform did you use?
Masterclass.
Oh,
it was like the
Masterclass.
actual
Oh,
master
wow.
class, like
Okay.
I got that as a gift from my in-laws, and it's a 2-hour class,
Oh,
and it was great, and it kind of set me on this journey of understanding what is possible with AI, and I think that's important. Like I wouldn't start with like an industry specific AI course
Well said.
because you're going to get too in the nuances of whatever. I think zoom out, understand what's possible, what's in the because it did a nice job of speaking to the theory a little bit, what's in the back end of some of these different, large language models,
Yeah.
how are they set up, but then it goes right into practical around how professionals should use it. So that would be my recommendation is take something like that. But all of the universities also have free courses that have some, good AI content.
That's well said. And Stephen, I remember you and I talked about this. What did you find in terms of time saving when you implemented some of those, we'll call it tips and tricks? Look at that face, the tips and tricks on sort of what you learned. Like it was significant, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I would say like at this point, it's like 2 to 3 hours a day. Like I'm able to refocus on something else. I would say more strategic workflows than what I was doing even 3 or 4 months ago.
Yeah. Significant.
Yeah, I mean,
Significant.
just if you think about it, like how I looked at it was where's a majority of my time going? And it was meetings. It was meetings and then the outputs for meetings, right? Follow-up email, action item trackers. And so as I look to add like an AI transcription tool like Otter AI, to help me not have to take meeting minutes. That saved time. And then I was able to layer in the creation of GPTs that leverage the artifact from that Otter AI, which is the transcript. And then, I was able to just do a lot. But I know we're running long,
Yeah.
Jackie, but thank you for taking some time with us. We really enjoyed this. How should people get in contact with you? LinkedIn, TikTok? What are you big
I don't
on?
have a TikTok. Yeah, no,
Okay.
LinkedIn is the spot. It's Jackie Guilbault. And please check us out at documentcrunch.com too. We have a great LinkedIn as well. You can follow us there.
You guys do well on LinkedIn. I'll give you a little shout out.
We do.
I feel like the content is always, and I'm not saying this because you said I say nice things about your content, but it seems relevant. You guys are able to, I think, lean into the education side. So yeah, people check out Document Crunch. They're a solid crew. Jackie, thank you. Anything else before we go?
No, that was it. Thank you so much. We covered a lot, and it's always a pleasure to talk to you both.